If you want to know what a communist utopia used to look like, there is no better place than to visit Nowa Huta, the eastern district of the Polish city Krakow. This neighborhood was built in the 1950s, and the style that was implemented to build all this was called Socialist Realism. It was an idea to give you an impression of a communist utopia. Hey, welcome back regular viewers. If you're new, I'm Stefan, I'm a history teacher and I'm hustling history for you. If you like this content, please consider subscribing, do hit the notification bell to become part of the hustle. Let's start. Poland was created as an independent nation after the First World War. However, 1st of September 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland from the west, the Soviets did so from the east, and they carved up the Second Polish Republic. Poland was no more. Eventually, the Nazis also overran the Soviet territories when they launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941. But then the tide changed, and at the end of the war, the Nazis were driven out of Poland by the Red Army. Now the communists were in charge, and the People's Republic of Poland was established, a communist state, where basically Moscow was calling the shots. Especially in Central and Eastern Europe, the war damage was enormous. Now Krakow, however, the scene of carnage and tragedy, did not suffer much material damage. However, new neighborhoods needed to be built, and that's why they created Nowa Huta, the eastern part of Krakow. It was established as an independent city, but was later added to the Krakow municipality. The style that was implemented for this was named Socialist Realism. Socialist Realism originated from the Soviet Union during the 1920s. After the Russian Civil War, where the Reds fought the White, was over, the Soviet Union was created. It was a communist one-party state. Now in 1928, Joseph Stalin gained absolute power. Now up until that time, artists enjoyed relative freedom as long as their art wasn't overtly anti-Soviet. Yet, with Stalin in charge, this changed. Art had to be adjusted to the simple worker. There was no more room for complicated, nuanced messages. No, straightforward simplicity was the key. Everyone had to understand the art. The present and the future had to be idealized. Basically, you see a form of forced optimism, what characterized communists so much. The state tells everything is perfect, yet there are shortages all over the place. According to Stalin, the artists were the engineers of the soul. Artists had a function to spread Soviet ideals. They basically made propaganda. Socialist realist art portrayed the simple worker in health and happiness. During and after the Second World War, ideals of sacrifice and heroism were applied to the socialist realist art. When I visited North Korea in 2016, you clearly see the ideals of many statues dedicated to the Korean War, and you will be amazed by the gigantic size of these sculptures. Stalinist architecture is a form of socialist realism that can be seen in European cities like Warsaw, Riga, Minsk, Kiev, and Moscow. And a prime example of socialist realism is the place where I am now, here in the eastern Krakow district of Nowa Huta. Nowa Huta means new steelworks. Basically, this neighborhood had to house the laborers in the nearby steel factory, because the so-called proletariat had to be created. Now, according to Lenin, the revolution had to be carried out by a small group of revolutionaries. And the reason for that was that Russia back then lacked a mass labor movement. And basically the same goes for Poland. Therefore, this district had to be created. It had to draw the lower class citizens. First Nowa Huta, and then the rest of Poland was the idea. The first years were the hardest. While this neighborhood was still under construction, its inhabitants were plagued by crime, poverty, hunger. Children were being neglected, and I even read stories of the bodies of babies that were found at the nearby river. The architect of this neighborhood was Tadeusz Piasecki, and this neighborhood was built in the 1950s with symmetric precision, as you can basically see. Actually, Nowa Huta was built as a separate city, but was later added to the Krakow municipality. After the district was finished, crime rate and unemployment decreased. It was also the first atheist district created because there was no church. Now this led to protests by Catholics that were supported by the Pope, and at the end of the 60s a church was erected. When in 1989 communism fell, the street names of this district were changed. The names of Russian and Cuban revolutionaries had to make way for Polish national heroes. And this square is even named after the former American president Ronald Reagan. Unemployment rose, and those who could afford to leave the district did. And what was left was a shady district with a high crime rate. However, in recent years, younger families started to move in, and also tours are being given to give curious tourists an impression of what a communist utopia used to look like. Now, if you think that the Poles were just hapless victims of communism, well, you're wrong. On several occasions, the Poles rose against their communist rulers, and one of these occasions was in Poznan. Now, if you want to know more about these Poznan protests, you can click right here to check out the video that I made about that. Do not forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you later.